Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the recap and review of NCIS Season 16, Episode 24, Daughters. Trying to keep it together. So we start out with Gibbs and Sloane rushing to meet a very panicked Fornell at the hospital. He says that Emily collapsed and stopped breathing at a college party, but they don't know what caused it. The doctor comes out and says they were able to stabilize her, but she's still in critical condition. The doctor asks Gibbs if he's Emily's family, and he says he's her uncle, which oh. But before he goes back to the room, he turns around and holds Sloane's hand for a minute. Okay. The doctor then tells them that they figured out that Emily overdosed on opioids and Fornell has to prepare himself that she might not make it through the night, which he does not take kindly to. Fornell tells the doctor that they should be gathering their entire personnel because they need all hands on deck. Fornell then whips out his gun and tells the doctor to save his daughter's life. And Gibbs is just like, oh, wow, that's great. Gibbs and the doctor calm Fornell down and the doctor says he's not going to press any charges, which is convenient. Torres and Bishop come to meet Gibbs at the hospital and they say they checked out Emily's party she was at and a lot of the people there think someone spiked her drink, which has been happening a lot on her campus recently. Fornell, meanwhile, is trying to buy every single flower arrangement from the gift shop, but the pharmacist tells him he can only have 2, and Gibbs has to physically restrain him. He tells Fornell that he should be there for Emily, so Gibbs will run home and get him some clothes. Gibbs then goes to his house and picks out some dirty flannels and a bottle of liquor. Just the essentials. Before he can leave, however, he is interrupted by the ghost of Diane. He immediately tries to run away and is like, I'm not doing this. I don't think he has much of a choice. Diane wants him to find out who drugged her little girl. Gibbs goes to Vance the next day and is like, I want Emily's case. Vance immediately is like, no, you're personally involved and this isn't even NCIS's jurisdiction, which is fair. Interestingly enough, Ducky comes in and lets them know that recently a Navy contractor has been involved in a court case involving the building that Emily was drugged in, which can technically give NCIS jurisdiction over the case. And Vance, much like everyone else watching, is like, okay, I'll buy it. But then he gets a 911 text from Fornell and rushes off to the hospital. When he gets there, Emily is wide awake and she asks if he knows who drugged her. Not yet. When she stands up, Emily sees that Fornell painted her toes, which is an adorable callback to when Fornell was in a coma. We love traumatic family traditions. Once Emily leaves, Fornell turns to Gibbs and says that he thinks they should team up to kill literally every drug dealer. Glad to see he's taking things slow. Sloane and McGee interview 2 of Emily's friends that drove her to the hospital that night, and one of them reluctantly admits that she found a pill while she was cleaning up the following morning. They hand the opioid over in hopes that it can help them track down whoever did this to Emily. They also ask one of the friends to identify the man they think drugged Emily, and he's like, oh, he has a nose ring. Then Gibbs is like, oh, that's our guy. Because nose rings are very rare on college campuses. Casey analyzes the opioid they got from Emily's friends, and she figures out that it was the same chemical compound that was found in Emily's blood. She also says that it's a bootleg drug, so if they can find out where someone got it from, they can find out who got it. Gibbs goes over Fornell's house for dinner, and Emily shows off all the new offensive gear her father has bought her, but it isn't long before she has to head out the door to go to her newspaper club. She forgets her stun gun though, so Fornell has to chase after her. While he's alone, the ghost of Diane confronts him and asks him if it comes down to it, will he do for Emily what he already did for Kelly? With a mouth full of meatloaf, Gibbs pronounces that he doesn't know who he is. Just in time for Fornell to walk back in. He eventually gets Gibbs to admit that he's been talking to the ghost of Diane. He then roasts Gibbs for being crazy, which is bold, coming from a man who just pulled a gun on a doctor and tried to fist fight a pharmacist. Gibbs then has to run meet Bishop at a crime scene where they found a man had overdosed on the same pill that Emily had been drugged with. The man says that he got the opioids from Professor Ralphie, who lives near the campus and sells drugs to some of the students. They go to his apartment and Gibbs politely knocks on the door a few times before kicking it in, along with Diane's face, but I'm sure she'll be fine. Not only do they see that Ralphie has died from an apparent heroin overdose, but they also find Emily in the bathtub, high out of her mind. They talk to Emily and she reveals that Ralphie was her dealer. Fornell appears in the doorway, and him and Emily end up getting in this huge fight that ends with her storming away and him chasing after her. Meanwhile, Palmer figures out that Ralphie was actually murdered and the crime scene was staged. As he's explaining that, one of Emily's friends appears in the doorway. Someone just really needs to shut that door. The friend then explains that he lives with the drug dealer that he described earlier. McGee's like, are you gonna mention that to us? Or they bring the friend in for interrogation, but Gibbs stays in the elevator to interrogate himself through the form of Ghost Diane. She asks him the same question from earlier and says this whole situation is all his fault. Casey, meanwhile, overhears him arguing with himself in the elevator and is like, you do you. In the squad room, they pull up Ralphie's credit card statements, and Fornell sees something that piques his interest and he walks off. In interrogation, the friend reveals that he may have fibbed about some of the details, and yes, he might have known that Emily was using, but he didn't know her addiction had gotten that bad. McGee and Torres also get him to admit that Ralphie got his supply from a pill-happy podiatrist. The next thing we see is this podiatrist with his new patient, which just so happens to be Fornell. Great. The situation very quickly escalates from a low-key interrogation to Fornell kicking doors and taking names. And waterboarding. Luckily, Torres comes to stop him just in time, and the doctor says he's not gonna press any charges. The biggest plot twist this episode is that no one's taking Fornell to court. Later, Fornell goes to Gibbs' house, and he's really overwhelmed and distraught, and is like, I need her mother. Fornell wants Gibbs to get in touch with Ghost Diane for him, and Gibbs is like, it's not really Diane. But then Fornell really breaks down, and Gibbs is like, fine, let me see what I can do. God, this episode of Long Island Medium is weird. The best way I can describe what happens next is that Ghost Diane possesses Gibbs so that she can speak to Fornell through his human form. And I know what you're thinking. Again, yes, it's really bizarre, but it's also very endearing. Diane tells him that Emily doesn't need action, she needs her father, and Fornell apologizes for not picking up Diane's call the night she died. But then Gibbs/Diane is cut off by a phone call from McGee and Casey. They say that Ralphie actually stole the doctor's pad and was forging prescriptions and then getting them filled by a sketchy pharmacist, who also just happens to sell flowers. Bishop interrogates him and reveals that the needle they found in Ralphie's arm has his fingerprints all over it. The pharmacist says that once he figured out NCIS was snooping around, he went to warn Ralphie and things got out of hand. He's about to confess to the murder, but that's not enough for Gibbs and Fornell anymore. Gibbs goes in and busts out what I can only imagine is his vigilante notebook and says that he knows that the drugs were coming from Canada. The pharmacist says that he's a dead man if he reveals who sold him the drugs and he'd rather just go to prison. Back at their house, Fornell opens his arms to Emily and she finally admits that she needs help. She also says that her mother appeared to her in a dream, saying that she loved her and that Gibbs' house smelt like burnt cheese. Touching. In his basement, Gibbs tells Diane that they were able to catch the bad guy without going rogue. However, she says she knows that he's not done with this case quite yet. Diane tells him that the reason he's so afraid of getting personally involved in cases is because he's afraid to get hurt after Shannon and Kelly died. But now his rules are crumbling and he's letting people in and he's terrified. Diane says whenever he's ready to talk, they'll all be here for him. In his head, about to break into his house. She tells him he doesn't have to face the danger alone and then leaves. Gibbs then hears a noise upstairs, and we finally get that Ziva reference we've been waiting for. As in, we refer to the fact that she's standing right there. And then Ziva bounds down the steps and she's like, there's no time for pleasantries, you're in danger. Meanwhile, Gibbs is just like, what's happening? And then Ziva stops in front of him and she's like, aren't you gonna say anything? Which is weird because she just told him there was no time to talk. And then he just looks at her and calls her Ziva and she smiles. And that is daughters. Holy sh*. Before I talk about Ziva, I do want to mention some other things from the episode because other things did happen in this 43 minutes of television, if you can believe it. I really enjoyed the scenes with Diane. They were such a wild ride from start to finish. I like that they pointed out a couple times that she was in his head and the things that she was saying were like manifestations of his own thoughts, if you will. Not only was it amazing to see him have a connection with Diane again, but it was also so interesting to see him have confrontations with himself. When you remember that the stuff that Diane is saying is the stuff that Gibbs is thinking about, it's just so much more interesting and like sad. Does the stuff with Fornell become more uncomfortable when you remember that it was just Gibbs standing there? Yes. Does it stand as a testament to how amazing their friendship is? Yes. But Emily says that her mother came to her in a dream and says that Gibbs' house smells like burnt cheese, which is something that the Diane in Gibbs' head had brought up. Maybe Gibbs was like whispering in Emily's ear while she was asleep. Or like, I don't know, Haley Joel Osment is in the building. The Emily drug thing did take me off guard, because if you can remember a few weeks back, I had been saying that I read that Emily has a drug problem. But then that article came out in the TV Guide that was like, no, she was drugged. And so I was like, oh, I guess I'm wrong. But I wasn't wrong, I was just played. I appreciate though that I went in just kind of thinking she had been drugged, because I think it made that bathtub reveal all the more wild. I still really want to get updates on Emily and Fornell. Even if the season 17 premiere doesn't deal with the whole drug thing, I really hope we still get that, and I have a feeling we will. I was a little surprised we didn't see or hear about Sloane's daughter, because after the point was made last week to bring her up and then it like took place in a hospital, I was kind of wondering if we might get some kind of reference, but we never did. But I still think that's going to be something we'll explore down the road, which is really exciting. This episode was really focused on Gibbs, Diane, Emily, and Fornell. And because of that, I think we missed some connections with the other members of the team. Like, there were really no actual conversations between Gibbs and anyone else that wasn't one of those 3 other people. But even then, we still got some Easter eggs about that, just to like let you know they haven't forgotten. There was a moment where Casey told Torres that she thinks the way Fornell is acting about Emily being drugged is the same way he would react if Bishop were drugged. It was such a small moment, but like, it made its presence known. Also, Sloane and Gibbs held hands. Hi! I really loved that moment, and I think it kind of confirms that Gibbs was the one Sloane was talking about last week, just in case we were unsure. Will we see Gibbs' notebook again? Gibbs had this little leather notebook that he was writing in at his house and that had details about the case that he investigated outside of work. So I do wonder if that's like his little like vigilante diary. I really enjoy that we're still talking about the rules, because I think that's such a deep conversation that Gibbs needs to have at this point. I love that it's been such a focus, and I think we're going to continue to focus on that to some extent. Everything in this episode felt so intertwined. It really felt like there was no strong division between an A plot and a B plot. Like, everything just felt so meshed together, and I think maybe that's why we lost some of that like other team stuff, but it all just felt very connected, and I liked that a lot. You know what else I liked a lot? I literally missed half of Ziva's dialogue when the scene was airing, because the second she appeared in the doorway, I just leapt up and started shrieking. And then Gibbs is calling her Ziva, and I'm weeping. By the way, to all those websites that are saying he called her Ziva, hi, I'm your new editor. I was hoping, and I kind of had a small feeling she might return at some point, but like, wow, did I not think it was gonna be now. And literally all the time, whenever there's a moment where like they cut away to something or like they see someone in the distance, I'm like, maybe it's Ziva. Like earlier in the episode when Bishop sees someone in the bathtub, I'm like, maybe it's Ziva. So at the end when Gibbs heard the noise, I was like, maybe it's Ziva. But then it was. I appreciate so much the lengths that they went to keep this a secret, and like I'll put some articles below that like talk about it, but they like snuck her in after midnight, and it was shot with a skeleton crew, and no one had the script pages, and it wasn't on any of the call sheets. Like, it's crazy, because if they had told us that Ziva was coming back, I still would have been like over the moon thrilled, obviously, but the fact that the reveal was such a shock, like, I think that just made it an experience. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you watched my last video, I was like, I just hope we get one solid Ziva reference. And I think this counts. I really was just hoping for one Ziva reference. Like, I thought Gibbs might be like, guys ever talk to ghosts? And Bishop would be like, oh. And then with only 1 minute left and we still hadn't heard anything, I was like, maybe that thing that Diane said was a reference, like they'd all be there for him if he needed it, like maybe that's setting up her arc for the next season. And then there was more. I also thought it was funny how some people immediately went into like, but it could be just a ghost, which by the way I don't think it is. I do think it's like really Ziva in her human form. Listen, I don't care if she's a ghost or a phantom or a figment of his imagination. She could turn out to be Jem and the holograms. I don't care. Like, can we just take a moment to appreciate that Cody DePablo just walked down those steps on our televisions? So like a bunch of people are already discussing this and I'm like, hi, I'm still in the middle of like cardiac arrest. I'll catch up with you in a second. Like, it was a magical moment. To me, it still is a magical moment to me. Whenever I watch that clip, I like can't even control my face. Like I just start smiling. I love how much people love it. And yes, I know there's some people who don't like it as much, but like overall, I feel like this is just something that people have been waiting for such a long time. And Ziva is such just like a beloved character. I'm like, oh, I'm also just so appreciative that Cody DePablo came back for this. Even people who hadn't watched the show in years were talking about it. It makes me so happy. Like, it just warms my heart. I just think this is easily one of the most iconic moments in NCIS history. And I think the fact that it was such a shock just like adds on to that. I'm like envisioning it in my head right now and crying. And I was hoping so badly that it would be involved in the season premiere, and then it was looking like it really wasn't, and then it all just happened and it was lovely. I do wonder if we're gonna start with that like ghost theory that I was thinking about. I made a joke in the last video that I was like, haha, it would be so funny if Gibbs is seeing ghosts, then he sees Ziva and he thinks it's a ghost. But now I think that might actually be what's happening. Like, I think it would make sense after Diane's whole speech and that he's seen ghost Diane throughout this whole episode if he's just like, oh, you're another ghost. And she's like, no. I also like that she was brought in to help Gibbs, which is something that like myself and a lot of other people were theorizing she could get brought in for. I just think that makes their father-daughter relationship so much stronger. And I love it. Also just going from seeing her on those steps in Kill Ari to seeing her on those steps now. It's just such a moment. It's such a transformation. There's just so much I want to see, and I think we could see in this arc. I would love if she was in the first 2 episodes of this season. But unless I'm wrong, I think right now it says she's only going to be in the first episode. They did confirm that she'll be in the first episode, in case you were wondering. I can't control my face muscles. I'm just like, I want to see her have a conversation with Gibbs so bad. I mean, there's a million things that it could be about, like even beyond like them explaining the case. Like, I think there's just so much they've missed in each other's lives that they need to catch up on. Just hearing them talk about what has happened in each other's lives since then, I think would be amazing. I really want to see her alone with Bishop. You know, her and Bishop have this bond now, even though they've never met, and now they kind of have the opportunity to. Would Ziva keep Bishop's secret that she kept her secret? Would it come out? Would Gibbs freak out? I feel like he would be a little upset. I think the discussions they could have, well, first of all, I think Ziva could have an interesting discussion with literally every character on this show, but I think the discussion that Ziva and Bishop could have could be so intriguing, so important. Even beyond the bond that they've established through their like pen pal program, I think the legacy that they have in both sitting at that desk warrants like a great conversation between them. I just really, really want to see all the characters that knew her interact with her, and not only interact with her, but I kind of want to see them find out she's alive. Jimmy Palmer, they have such a beautiful friendship. McGee, like what would McGee say? I'm just rambling now, but I keep remembering like she hasn't met them since they've had like a family. Like McGee has a wife and kids now, and I want to see her like talk about that with him. Again, I don't know how likely this is. I think it might be fun if she picked up on some of the new relationships in the office. Maybe Bishop and Torres would remind her of some relationship she's had. I don't know, that might spark a conversation. I know I'm just really looking ahead, but like I'd love to see like a badass Ziva moment. Well, every moment Ziva's on screen is a badass moment. Just her like chucking a knife or something. I think that'd be beautiful. I'm a little nervous, obviously, because we haven't seen her in 6 years and we don't know like what she's been up to, what she's been doing, like how is she different? You know, I would certainly imagine she's different now than she was 6 years ago. I don't think we need to see Tony and Tali in the flesh. Would I love that? Of course, but I think we need just some updates on them. I would just be so content with her like just telling them updates, or even just her like getting a picture of Tony and Tali on her phone. I would be like through the roof. That brings me to some season 17 questions. I'm curious to know why Gibbs is in danger. Like, is it related to Hernandez? Because McGee and Bishop and Torres had that conversation outside of the courtroom where they were like, well, if the judge had anything real on him, he would have pursued him legally. Has something with that changed? Like, is he pursuing him now legally? I don't know how Ziva would get involved in that unless she like stabbed the lawyers. Does it have to do with the drug dealer that the pharmacist was scared of, that Gibbs wants to go after? I just want to know why he's in danger, and I also want to know how Ziva knows he's in danger. What has been her occupation since then? I mean, we know she's been in the office, but like, has she been living in the office? Has she been living in Paris? Like, does she still pursue crime to some extent? Or is it just something she like heard about through the grapevine, or heard about through Mossad, or just like one of her contacts let her know that Gibbs came up on someone's radar? I had gotten the gist that she was pretty done like fighting crime, but again, that was 6 years ago. Has something changed? Or did something just come up on her radar and she's like, I need to go protect him? Again, has she been in Paris? Has she been living with Tony and Tali? If she's been living in isolation, that might not be my favorite choice, but we'll see. We'll see what has been happening with her. That is something I'm a little bit nervous to find out. This isn't even a question. This is like another wish list thing. I really, really just want to hear her talk about her daughter, because we've had Tony talking about their daughter, but this is the first opportunity we're getting to have Ziva talk about her daughter and her family and Tony. I'm just so excited and a little bit scared. Speaking of which, does Tony know she's alive? I hope he does. Again, I hope that he's been living with her. I hope they've been living together in Paris. That might just be like a pipe dream of mine. Obviously, she's been in America for some reason recently. Like, is this a business trip, or has this been a more frequent residence for her? I think it would break my heart a little bit if Tony doesn't know and she hasn't seen her daughter in 3 years, like to protect them. But that might end up being what's happening. I think we'll just have to wait and see. The next 20 minutes of this video was just me like daydreaming the episode. Speaking of The Office, how much has the landlord been involved? Which might be a dumb question, but like, has she updated her that Bishop has been coming back? Like, has Odette been in on it? Has she spoken to Bishop since then? I didn't think she had, but again, at this point, what would surprise me? Actually, that actually would surprise me a little bit. Can you imagine if Bishop and Ziva have been like just fighting crime together this whole time? That would be a moment, a reveal if I've ever seen one. What did Ziva break? Because there was that like really loud bang, and like it might have just been her opening and closing the door, but like pretty loud. She like tussle with Ghost Diane on her way out. Maybe Ziva's the reason that his hallway smells like burnt cheese. Has Ziva just been like sneaking into his house and like burning nachos or something? I don't know. God, I'm really just gonna be like setting up shop in front of the TV until September. One thing that has bothered me literally since Past, Present, Future aired is that the last shot we had of her was just her sobbing. I always felt like it just left her story in such a dark place. And now it's not the last shot we have of her. It's not her last episode, which is just so crazy to me to even like say that. I have been waiting for this moment since 2013. Even when I took a little break from watching the show, I would literally sometimes just be like, God, I miss Ziva. As I've said before, she's just one of my favorite characters ever, and I love her so much, and I'm so excited her story gets to continue like this with her physically there. And again, Hi, Cody de Pablo, thank you, I love you. And again, like, perennial was the last time she was even referenced, which I think made it that much crazier when she just appeared in the doorway. And I think, again, like, it just makes the payoff at the end. Like, you think this whole episode we're not gonna hear about Ziva, and then all of a sudden you do. Like, I've watched the episode in its entirety 4 times at this point. But every time, once the basement scene starts with Diane, I'm just sitting there like a small child on Christmas morning. Right now, I'm just like, ah! I know you all came here for a very eloquent review, so I'm sorry to disappoint. I'll for sure link to a couple things below. I'll link to just the Ziva part. I'll link to the whole basement scene, but I'll also link to the full episode on CBS because I think this is certainly an episode worth watching in its entirety. Yes, the last 43 seconds are magical and like absolutely noteworthy just on their own. But I think it's one of the funnier episodes we've had in a little bit, which again seems weird based on the subject matter, but I digress. Going from like the Super Bowl commercial for She to now, what a whirlwind. I'm so excited. Again, a little bit nervous, but I'm so excited to see where we go in season 17. Also, just thank you guys for caring what I have to say about the episodes, and thank you for like leaving comments and stuff. I appreciate that. I appreciate you. Thank you. Please let me know your guys' thoughts and your reactions and what your season 17 premiere theories are. I'm excited, I'm nervous, and I can't wait to see where the season 17 premiere takes us.